The reforms Louis XIV instituted made France vastly stronger than it had been before, but Louis understood that military power and bureaucratic efficiency were not enough. For a king to be truly great, he needed recognition, admiration, fear, respect from the rest of Europe. In other words, he needed glory, or in French, la gloire. He sought glory relentlessly, and war was one of its most visible expressions. Between 1661 and 1715, he spent 35 of his 54 years on the throne at war, roughly 65% of his reign. Although Louis did not personally lead his armies into battle, he revelled in the spectacle of warfare. Most conflicts during this era were wars of position, dominated by sieges rather than sweeping battlefield engagements. When French armies besieged a fortress near the northern frontier, perhaps in Flanders or the Spanish Netherlands, Louis sometimes brought the entire royal court with him. Courtiers, ladies, servants, mistresses, and princes all followed the king to watch the drama unfold. If the fortress fell while Louis was present, the glory was even greater, and commanders often timed their actions accordingly. Louis fought wars to enhance his prestige, but other nations fought wars to stop him. England, the Dutch Republic, Spain, Austria, and various German states all feared his growing power. His last and greatest conflict, the War of the Spanish Succession, was a true world war, fought not only across Europe but also in North America and at sea. Even when almost all of Europe united against him, Louis managed to hold his own. Louis strengthened his authority in two principal ways. 1. Effective government at home. 2. Military success abroad. But he also mastered a third strategy: political spectacle. One of his ministers famously remarked, "If a king cannot win wars, he should at least build great buildings." Louis did both. The greatest symbol of his glory was the Palace of Versailles, often regarded as the most magnificent royal residence ever constructed. Located just outside Paris, the palace dazzled visitors with halls lined with polished mirrors, sparkling chandeliers, luxurious carpets and furniture, vast, geometrically arranged gardens, fountains, waterworks, and ornamental lakes, and even a canal large enough for mock naval battles. But Versailles was more than a stunning palace. It was a carefully engineered instrument of royal control. Louis never forgot the Fronde when rebels had burst into the royal palace and even entered his bedroom as a child. He built Versailles far enough from Paris to avoid the dangers of urban unrest, yet close enough to maintain influence. He also wanted a palace so magnificent that no French nobleman could hope to rival it. Every visitor would see instantly that only the king possessed the wealth and majesty required to build such a place. Versailles functioned as a stage upon which Louis played the starring role. From the moment he awoke to the moment he went to bed, his daily life was organized into elaborate ceremonies. Even mundane actions, waking, dressing, dining, became public rituals. During the morning levee, nobles entered the king's chamber in carefully ranked order. Each had a specific role. One held the king's shirt, another his stockings, another the right sleeve of his dressing gown. To modernize, this looks like vanity, but Louis used these rituals with shrewd political purpose. The nobles attending him daily could not plot rebellion while standing at his bedside. Louis turned them into courtiers, dependent on royal favor, eager for privileges, and too occupied with the rituals of court life to create trouble at home. It might seem surprising that powerful nobles lowered themselves to such tasks, but there was a compelling reason. Versailles was where favors were granted. If a noble wanted a military commission, an office for a son or nephew, a pension or influence in provincial politics, the best time to ask was during the king's rituals. Petitioning through letters rarely worked. Louis preferred requests made in person during moments when the king ceremonially interacted with his nobles. Asking for favors became so common that specific moments in the morning ceremony were reserved for these requests. If the king replied, "I do not know that man," it was a disaster, meaning the petitioner needed to remain at court longer, making himself visible, loyal, and known. Louis was the greatest of the absolute monarchs. Kings and queens across Europe imitated him by reforming their armies, building grand palaces, limiting the power of nobles, church courts, and representative estates, expanding the state bureaucracy, and fighting wars for glory, security, or to counter France itself. But Louis left an even deeper legacy. He accelerated the long-term growth of centralized government, a trend that would continue in Europe and beyond into the 20th century. Thanks to his cultural patronage, French replaced Latin as the language of diplomacy, refined society, and educated elites. From the late 17th century until the end of World War II, French was the language of international affairs. Anyone who wished to operate in European political or cultural life needed to speak French. Only in the modern era has French been replaced by English in this global role.